There has been a lot of great superhero and genre animation over the last few years in particular, and we've all been very happy. But now Marvel has finally come into the animation arena, and as I said in my non-spoiler review, they immediately jumped to the front of the pack, which a lot of you were offended by that statement. But I understand that because the other shows have meant so much to us. But I also knew that you hadn't seen Marvel's What If just yet. And already I'm getting tweets from many of you that you now see what I'm talking about. But I took your question to heart. How is it better? And so when I was going over the episode today for this breakdown, I was like, okay, let me lay out my argument for why artistically this does look better. You know, it's not a matter of choice or preference, although I guess maybe you could say it is, but this breakdown's almost going to turn into like an animation film school class because I'm going to highlight the very important creative choices that were made here. So now this is the Marvel Animation. They're starting their own animation studio, but they are of course part of Disney. And they were absolutely brilliant to borrow quite heavily from the stuff that makes Disney animation not only stand out from all the other animation out there, but also be at the forefront. And that's having the warmth and roundness. Not a lot of angularity in Disney animation, except for Atlantis, and that didn't particularly perform well. Disney developed a style that people really, really like. And again, it's like end credit sequences. If people can see that people like this so much, why don't other people try to duplicate it? But they don't for some strange reason. But I do think that Marvel Animation borrows heavily from Disney Animation. And the result is versions of our favorite characters that look very much like Disney princes and princesses. And who wouldn't love that? They've got the big eyes, they have the rosy cheeks, they have the hair. Very, very Disney animation. Again, it also reminds me a little bit of Disney ride animation at the theme parks where they'll have recaps of the stories to get you in the mood. And that's kind of what they're doing here to get you in the mood of these classic MCU movies. And they do that very effectively as well. They also have incredible depth. Not a lot of depth in other animation that we're talking about here. It feels very flat, but this has you very much feel like you're in a real environment. And they also have tremendous use of light, which is very much actually like what Steven Spielberg does so effectively. And no, I don't see it really in any other animation. That helps not only create depth, but it gives it like kind of a magical, exciting quality, which is why Spielberg uses it. J.J. Abrams has tried to duplicate that, but he just ended up with lens flare. But also, speaking of Steven Spielberg, this episode in particular is very Indiana Jones-like because, of course, they're also fighting Nazis. So it's a great choice to borrow so heavily from that style as well. Also, with the Iron Man version they have here, it's a little bit like Iron Giant as well, which was, a 1950s period piece. So kind of in the same general area. And all of those elements make this episode, and you'll see the other ones as well, but in different ways, makes it feel more like an animated movie than an episode. And so that's a big part of the difference here. It has also like a watercolor look to it. It feels like an animated movie instead of an episode, and that I think makes a huge difference. All right, now as for this episode, as I said, like a good Saturday morning cartoon, these episodes have a message. And the message here is the importance of being in the room, which is fantastic because that, of course, is a great callback to the very famous song in Hamilton, The Room Where It Happens. And so often, only a specific type of person has been allowed to be in the room throughout history. So as we, go through, I think, important changes with different, rights movements, as we should, more and more people are coming into the room. And it just shows that, you have to be in the room to even have a chance of certain things happening. And so that's what this episode a lot is about. That the moment that this multiverse is created is when Peggy says, no, I won't go sit in the booth. Although it seems nobody went to the booth then. They're like, well, if the woman's going to stay out here, I will too. But, she chose not to go in the booth. She chose to stay in the room. I think it's very nice they offered her a choice because usually in the 1940s, they would not. And that's a theme throughout the whole thing where, let me see, I'm looking at the cast list here. Colonel Flynn is like, you're lucky to be in the room. And then finally she says, you're lucky to be in the room. And we're like, very nice, very nice. So it's a really good message. And I hope everybody, after the awe of the episode wears off, takes that message to heart and remembers to make sure that, make sure you're always in the room. All right, now, as I also said in my non-spoiler review, it's Wonder Woman. It's Marvel's Wonder Woman. And now we can talk about it in a little more detail because, of course, this is a spoiler breakdown. With the sword, the shield, the way she moves, the World War setting, World War I versus World War II, it's very Wonder Woman. And I'm disappointed that DC, gave Marvel this opening. I also think it's hilarious that almost no one is calling them on it. Marvel never gets called on any of their stuff. It's crazy, but is also phenomenal. I do think that the action here is, again, just so well done, and it's like far superior to live action. And I mean, when we go through it, a full breakdown, I'll point some shots out to you. But one in particular I want to bring up is I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and I said, Peggy throws a motorcycle. We never saw Steve do anything like that in the live action movies. And my friend pointed out, well, in animation, that's just an easier thing to do. But I would hope that CGI and VFX in live action is extremely expensive. But they really need to work to get to a point where they can deliver the action of animation, because also, Marvel, as they continue to give you so much stuff, they're not only diluting their brand a little bit, but what if now their live action sequences don't hold up to the animated ones? I mean, that's something they might want to be a little bit concerned about. I also am interested to see what their She-Hulk looks like. I wrote a comic book that featured She-Hulk, and I imagine She-Hulk as being, turned into, a monster just as Bruce Banner is. Why would the same serum turn one into a monster and the other into a huge supermodel? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm curious to see what, Marvel decides to do in the series. Although I think because I heard that she's going to break the fourth wall like the cover of the comics, so they're probably going to do that version of the character. But this Captain Carter is very She-Hulk, not only in terms of strength, but also in build. And one thing that I absolutely love about Captain Carter is that she doesn't hesitate in her action sequences. A lot of times, particularly female characters will hesitate. Oh, should I do this? Is there, I think it's because they want to make it seem to audiences like, oh, well, it's her last resort. Because it's very aggressive, and women usually aren't depicted as aggressive. So I love that Captain Carter is super aggressive, almost to the point that it's a fault. She runs in without a plan. I just absolutely adore it. Now, I do think there's a potential for a slight backlash in that she does seem to be a little bit of a better Captain America. And you'll see in the next episode that T'Challa certainly makes for a better Star-Lord. I wouldn't want that to be a theme. It should be a different one. Although these episodes are so good, I cannot critique them. For instance, it was kind of weird considering the fact that Bucky went on to kill Howard Stark, but here she saves Bucky with a fantastic callback. He's saying, you almost ripped my arm off. And of course, he never becomes the Winter Soldier now. And as many of you pointed out in this story, now Bucky and Steve can grow old together. Although I hope that, I believe all these characters are going to come together a little bit later on in the series. So maybe we'll see an older Bucky and Steve. That would be really interesting. So the callbacks are fantastic. They do such a good job that it makes me feel, I wish they would tell us what episodes were coming up. And I think maybe they will after the first three, because, of course, we critics told you what the first three are. But it makes me, I almost wish I'd watched First Avenger again before seeing this episode so that I have it fresh in my mind. And you might want to watch the first Guardians of the Galaxy before you watch next week's episode. And Black Panther? I don't know about that. I definitely watch, I think, maybe if you have time, Guardians. You can enjoy it without. But I mean, if you want that extra level, you might want to do that. But so I'm very impressed with that. Now let's take a look at the voice actors. Pretty much everybody returned except for Chris Evans, which I find very odd. Josh Keaton did an okay job, but it's not Chris Evans. And so I think that kind of chipped away at the character even more. Although I think they did a very nice job having him hold his own. Hugo Weaving hasn't been back for a while, though, although Ross Marquand does such a good Hugo Weaving. He could almost make a business out of it. He should have called up the Matrix people and been like, I hear you, Hugo Weaving's not available for Matrix 4. I am. He's very, very good. But everybody else showed up. It's incredible. And I'm wondering, is that Daryl Hammond from Saturday Night Live? But probably not. But everybody else showed up, even Toby Jones. So it's incredible. I mean, how much money did they think they'd have to pay Chris Evans to do this? I think they should have paid it, quite frankly. What do you think? I think it makes a difference. I would have paid it. All right, let's break down the episode. I grabbed as many stills for this as I did for like 45-minute episodes because there's just so many gorgeous shots here. All right, so we start off with the new Marvel Studios logo, animation style, which interestingly looks flat, even though the rest of the show does such a good job adding depth. So that was kind of weird. And then we have the new intro that comes in, which I think is pretty good. But I really loved the cartoon aspects of this, that it not only reminded me of some good animation from the 1940s and stuff like that, but also even some live action movies. I loved this map. I thought that was fantastic, and the marching soldiers. But again, I'm going to point out sources of light while we do this. Look, they didn't have to add that sunlight in the top corner, but it really creates a fantastic feeling of, again, depth and also a cinematic feel. So it's nice to see the Red Skull again. He doesn't make it out of this episode alive because I guess he has to be on veneer, right, with the Soul Stone. So we start off with this, they do a little recap, as I said, like a ride. And I love this illustration of Steve Rogers. It's even actually in some ways better than, Chris Evans is the character. And that's what you get into a little danger with animation and illustrations, that they can just become, it takes on a fantasy element. So I just love that. I think that looks great. And then I love this too. That to me is just gorgeous. You can see the sparkling of the snow. I mean, this to me particularly seems like something you would see on the wall of an attraction before you board. And you're like, it's Steve's shield in the snow. You can, just for some reason, you more feel the hand wipe here with the way with the artistry. It's just gorgeous. That's true. Now that I think about it, MCU movies lack an artistry because they're stamping them out like a factory. They kind of, they have wonderful moments and I think they're very well made, but they don't have the artistry of this show. This is almost like, it's taking on a very cinematic feel that you don't see in the live action films, which again, gives it a little bit of a plus. All right, so we're in the room where it happens, or happened in this case, or I guess now about to happen. And they're like, are you sure that you wouldn't be, you want to go into up to the booth, Peggy, right? And you're like, you shut up, you guys. They're these guys, I don't know. They seem like they're really laying it on thick with the, being misogynistic, but some people do this. I mean, look what just happened to the governor of New York. So Peggy, she's not sure. She has that moment of thinking and she looks at Steve and she's like, he's so cute. She's very aggressive, also in her flirtations. And she's like, I'm going to stay in the room. I think it's interesting. She chose it to be because she wanted to be with the guy she liked, not because she wanted to be, a part of, it wasn't a career move. It was a personal move, but we'll take what we can get. All right. So there she is, just gorgeous shot. And as I said, apparently nobody went in the booth. They're like, fine, we'll all stand here. And she's in the back. Although that turns out to be a great spot because the Hydra guy was in the booth in the original movie. I was checking out some of the scenes from the first movie for comparison's sake. And look, he's out here. And I love this shot. So Disney princess. She's like, no, stop. Well, this is before she turns into a princess, right? She's about to turn into quite the weightlifting princess. And his lighter is disguised as a detonator and he blows up the room. Boy, that's a mess. And then we have our first bloodless shooting where, and look at the artistry with the silhouettes. They partly did that because, for ratings. But again, you don't see anything like that really in the MCU movies to date. So Steve goes down. I don't know what Steve thought he was going to do, but damn it, he's a hero. He's heroic in nature. So he grabs one of the test tubes, and in the original, they let the process go through the Hydra operative. He was look how he looks like such a Disney character there. It's fantastic. But in the movie, they let it go through. I don't know what his plan was there. I guess they wanted to see if it worked. But here, this guy's like, I'm going to grab some of the liquid beforehand so we can replicate it. So it's not totally like the original movie. But then this is a callback, of course, to the original film with that fantastic shot of her, taking aim at him. And she gets him this time. Down he goes, right next to Steve. And there's the remaining canister. But she doesn't care about that. She only cares about Steve. And this guy, the Colonel Flynn, is like, if it's now or never, we spent $60 million on this, get him back in there. And they're like, he can't, he's been shot. He's like, Stark, you go in. And he goes, I'm the button pushing guy, which of course sets up fabulous callbacks throughout the episode. Very well written and directed show. Incredibly well written and directed. And so Peggy's like, I'm going to do it. And I like that Stark's like, hell yeah, good idea, let's do it. So I look at this, the way she gets in. So she takes off her jacket. You can just see her in her camisole. And then look at this. It's so 1940s, the way she hops up on the end because of the skirt. And I also want to point out to you that because of her clothing, she has to move this way. Although when she puts on the Captain Carter uniform later on in the episode, her movements change significantly. So it's not only a gorgeous shot, but full of meaning. And I think that it's wonderful they had Captain Carter keep her femininity as well. So she gets in, she's like, let's do this. And Stark's like, oh yeah. And it's very powerful. Oh, there's 6 canisters of that liquid. And Steve's like, oh my goodness. And I love the mad scientist aspects here. I think it's really well done. And so just like in the first movie, although I thought it was interesting, she doesn't scream. Steve Rogers screamed. I think they should have maybe made her scream, but she doesn't scream. Maybe that's a commentary on how women can handle pain more. I don't know. Maybe they should have commented on that if that was true. I think, if you're going to take something away from one group and give it to another, I think, to make sure that you sell it, I think that you have to keep in mind making sure that you sell it. And so that everybody's like, you want everyone to be behind this. I sure am. So there she is, and she's huge, and she's already feeling the power coursing through her veins, the serum. So that's fantastic. And they have a great line. Howard Stark is like, it was a complete success. And then Colonel Flynn is like, this is a total failure. He's like, I love that she's like, I can be more than a pincushion because they're trying to get that serum out of her. And he's like, no thanks. Maybe someday you can give us a super soldier. Almost like through having a child, but here they're just, saying through science. So she's training, just like Steve Rogers did with the boxing punching bag. And I love this foreshadowing of the shield where she throws the weight into the wall. She's getting good at it. And so, Steve's keeping her company, because he likes her too. And they're talking about Bucky being shipped out. And this is where they start their thing about dancing, and they make the promise about the dance, which of course is also from the first movie. So, and of course was that wonderful, wonderful callback at the end of Avengers Endgame, which even made me tear up, and I'm not a big Captain America fan. I was like, that's beautiful. So look at this. Again, beams of light, Spielbergian beams of light. So our Nazis are in Norway, or Hydra, and you can see this car pull up. Oh my God, so much lens flare. J.J. Abrams is like, see, I told you. And then I love this. So Indiana Jones, you can see the medallion on the front of the car is the Hydra symbol. They're like, do you guys make your own cars? Talk about branding. Although Hydra really brands, as you're about to see in this episode. So they're in Norway, Tonsberg, and we see a briefing juxtaposed with what the Red Skull is doing there. And he wants the Tesseract. And you can see there's a picture of the World Tree there. And I guess this is a Norwegian professor who had his hands on it. And I just love the animation on Red Skull. It's just fantastic. He's so Disney villain. He just comes across as a Disney villain. And then again, look at the light source. And then the very 1940s, production code, Disney-esque, showing violence without actually showing it. You can see the silhouette of them opening fire and executing that professor on the back of the wall. It's good stuff. So then we have the Tesseract. They're learning about it, and they're like, we need this. And of course, like many people in charge, Colonel Flynn is dismissive and doesn't understand the seriousness of the situation. And Hydra, as you can see from all those flags, is very busy. And then they have a wonderful, again, really artistic transition, which from the square of the Tesseract in the book, we transition to it being the ice cube in her glass of, her drink. It's brilliant. All right, so they're sitting there. I love Dominic Cooper's Howard Stark is just a joy. And I love to see them build the world of Captain America. You see a lot of references to that as well. And it's a constant theme all the way through Falcon and Winter Soldier, or now Captain America and Winter Soldier. And I hope for the upcoming Captain America 4, they continue with this as well. So he's like, don't give up. And he gives her uniform, her USO uniform for war bonds she was supposed to wear, but he's upgraded it. And look, he apparently has a clothing line, Howard's Design Clothing. And there it is. And then she said, your stealth skills aren't so great. And I loved when he said, this is going to be awkward. And he slams her new shield down. And I just love the sound that vibranium makes. I was looking at some VFX shots the other day for Endgame, and I could see that in many cases, they don't use the shields. They're totally VFX, that they put it in post. And I think I've come to just adore Captain America's shield. For a long time, I didn't understand what the point of having it, what you could do with a shield. I only thought of it as something that was defensive. And I just love it. And it got even cooler in this episode. So slams it down, and look at this reflection in the shield. Oh my God, it's just so incredible. And she's like, let's do it. Okay, so here we are in Berlin with this fabulous Brandenburg Gate action sequence. I love the watercolor look to this. It reminds me a little bit of, again, Disney, with, for instance, how London looks at the beginning of Mary Poppins or in Peter Pan. Again, it's night, great use of light, and they're going to use the light so well to light this action sequence as you're about to see. So we have this, cavalcade going, and you can see that as they go, the Brandenburg Gate is in the background there. Once again, creating a very strong depth of field. And you have, again, beams of light. Fantastic. And inside, of course, we've got Toby Jones's character here, Arnim Zola. And then the Shield takes out the front driver. And then to speak to the quality of the directing, we see that motorcycle go down. Motorcycles, of course, are a constant theme, also in the world of Captain America. But you see it from inside this truck, and they follow it, and then they're like, "What was that?" And she catches her shield, and there she is on top of the Brandenburg Gate, so much like Wonder Woman, as we've seen in the DC movies so far. And that's just incredible to me. It's Wonder Woman. So she jumps into the air, does a flip that you don't see anyone do in live action because I guess it's too expensive. But they should spend the money. And then, again, use of light with the sparks when she impales her shield into the cement. Boy, a lot of cleanup on the city after these superhero fights. That's why I love the reimagining of the Vulture as a cleanup crew. But anyway, that's a whole different conversation. I hope we someday see that character again. So anyway, there she is in front of the Brandenburg Gate. And again, use of light with the reflecting off of her shield. And then to drive home the fact that they're Nazis, horrible Nazis, they say run her down. So it's like, all right, let's take these jerks out. And then they have this incredible sequence where she uses the momentum of the truck. An immovable object meets what is the saying? An unstoppable force, right? Although it turns out, is very stoppable. But the use of human anatomy and physics and the way these action sequences are figured out is just a joy to behold. So she stops it, and the momentum allows her to pick it up into the air. Her strength, and again using the momentum of the truck. And then look, she flips it up. And she's like, that's incredible, let's try it again. And then you have this shot where she stops this truck, and those Nazis go out the windshield. In real life, they'd be dead. But it's a cartoon, so they don't I think they just maybe never get up. So she stops it, and then then this motorcycle comes around the corner of the truck to reveal Captain Carter standing there. And look at the light used to light the sequence. It's the light on this motorcycle. It's still the headlights from the truck that she stopped. And then you have the Brandenburg Gate in the background. So it's just really creative from a cinematography standpoint. So she must be fighting stormtroopers here, because I can't believe not one of them. I'm like, why are you guys all aiming for the shield? Aim for her legs, for Pete's sake. But they're stupid. So there's the shot where she picks up the motorcycle, which I just thought was fantastic. And then I love this, where she's standing in front of the truck, so the headlights illuminate the action sequence, and she just waits for these idiots to come up on both sides so she can take them out as they come up, right? It's like brilliant. And she just keeps throwing it back and forth, working with the momentum of the shield, and it's just like almost like ballet. It's just so fantastic to see. And as that's happening, classic Indiana Jones, of course, the big guy comes out of the truck, does the neck snap, stretches his neck, he's all ready to go, loosening up. And then we have this little moment where she takes out another Nazi with her shield, and then she's like, where have you been all my life? And I'm like, I know, that thing's incredible. And again, great use of sound for the shield. And then this guy's like, oh, weak Fräulein. And that really gets her. She's like, fragile. And she's like, fragile? So she dumps the shield. She's just going to go for brute strength, but she also uses her smarts, because as he goes high, she goes low. Although that's a nice reference to the going high and going low at the end of the episode, now that I think about it. So well written. And she takes him out right in the knee, crippling him. And then I love the reactions. And then she apparently hits him in the stomach. In a more adult show, she would have hit him a little bit to the south. And I love that. So Disney, that reaction shot in particular. And then, good night, sweet prince. And then look at that. That, in comparison to how she got into the chamber for the transformation, is really striking, in my opinion. So it's fantastic. And she's like, I got you, Zola. So she delivers the Tesseract. And I like that he's like, that's not nuclear, is it? And look again, lighting. The way it lights the blue light from below. Just absolutely genius. And she's like, Stark will know what to do with this. And he's like, oh, indeed I do. And he builds Steve an Iron Man suit, because he makes it very clear later in the episode, and even in the beginning, that he's not the guy for the action. but he's able to set other people up so that they can go in. So Steve tells Peggy that Bucky's been captured. So she's going to go and do it. And he grabs her hand. And I love the look on her face. She's like, is this finally happening? Not quite, Peggy. But, you guys are moving painfully slowly ahead in your relationship. And so she's like, I'll get him. And then I love this. Again, depth. Showing the guy, driving in, that direction. They didn't have to do that. It's a really important shot. So then I love that she comes running alongside him and she's like, I'd love to give this a go. And then she mugs him, but it's okay because he's a Nazi. Takes the motorcycle and drives off. Classic Captain America family thing. They all love motorcycles. They look great on motorcycles. So there she is. She looks fantastic. Look at the way she uses her. You can just tell the stomach muscles, everything, the momentum to pull this up, uses the weight of the motorcycle and the height to crash in the gates. So fantastic. Then she plays bowling with the Nazis in the yard. And then look at this. Again, they just seem to be shooting at the shield, but she picks it up and then kicks it off and amazing aim, but gets it into the tower and explodes. It's just fantastic. So it's so nice. Even Neil McDonough came back to do the voice here. So she rescues them. And I love the way she looks when she's running down here with, again, beams of light. But you can feel the strength and the weight of her as she runs. And look, again, she's got great form, Peggy. Fantastic form. So I like this animated Bucky. Again, talk about a Disney prince. He looks phenomenal. And I like that Sebastian Stan has like a more youthful, naive narration, because he's not as worldly as the Winter Soldier we've been recently seeing. So I think that's fantastic. So she's like, what are you, the Queen of England? And she rips off the gate. And they're like, okay. And so you have this famous shot, but now she's front and center. And I think just as this might be becoming a bit too much for some of the more toxic or let's say sensitive fans out there, and they put them on the ropes. And this to me is right out of Wonder Woman with hitting off the ammunition, the ordnance. And so that's total Wonder Woman to me. But then they need air support. And I love that Roger says, copy that, Roger's inbound. And it's great. And he comes in his new suit. And I like that McDonough says, or Dum Dum Dugan says, oh, are you telling me she's friends with that Hydra Stomper? And the Bucky line, as everyone has been saying, is fantastic, where he goes, I think I'm friends with him too. And the line reading from Sebastian Stan is just incredible. So they're like, let's dance. Wasn't that great? They're like going to dance on the battlefield. And I like this 1940s kind of look at Iron Man tech with him in the suit. So he has also, the Tesseract gives him some pretty impressive blasts. And then I like this shot. And I think it's great that Steve is in there. He's an extremely supportive boyfriend, almost a little too supportive, where he's like, let's cheer on Peggy, Captain Carter. And you're like, well, she should probably say, oh, and also thanks to Steve Rogers. But she's just like, thank you. And then they do a fantastic 1940s music montage. Oh, I love it. Montage Man approves. If you've never seen the Robot Chicken sketch, it's hilarious. But this is fantastic. They do a great job. And then, of course, Colonel Flynn is like many people in charge, is taking credit for the whole thing. And it says, hello from Brooklyn, he wrote on his fists. And then you see just this fantastic aerial sequence. So she jumps on the back, they're gonna go on a date, and look at her ability to just go through the air and take out these planes, which reminds me a lot of Falcon. So that's really fantastic, because we saw a lot of those kind of action sequences in his show. So she goes, I love this shot, going right toward the plane, goes right in, and then they have this long take. It's like a little bit like a hallway fight, but a hallway in the sky. Takes them out, pushes this guy up the roof, thankfully, because again, it's a cartoon, they're all wearing parachutes. Then she comes up, runs along the top of the plane. She's like, oh, let me take out another one. Oh my God, it's amazing. Rips out, breaks the rotary on the front of the plane. Comes in, grabs, stops it. And then after she takes him out, she's able to dismount. Like 10 perfect 10s across the board for you guys. And look, Steve's waiting. I wish he'd done a little bit more, but Steve's ready for pickup. And she grabs hold, and you're like, what a duo. So anyway, but Red Skull has his own activities. So here we have another Nazi commander is telling him to get in line, and he shoots him. no honor among thieves or Nazis. And I did like the way this was handled. I thought, the close-up of the gun, I thought that was handled really well. And then with him pulling off his face, that other guy wishes he was in a Mission Impossible episode because they would take him alive. But nope, this guy's going to die. And one of the last thing he sees is the Red Skull's true face reflected in his eye. Oh, it's so cinematic. And then look at the lights. Again, look at the lights behind the Red Skull. And he's like, Hydra. And this is very unsettling considering recent events. So, yikes. Never forget. Now, here we have another bar sequence, which is reminiscent of the Steve and Bucky sequence from the first movie, although this one is quite romantic. Although some of us feel the other one has some interesting undertones. But anyway, she's very aggressive, and she's like, I like you, and I like this, Steve. Steve is like, I have her right where I want her. It's fantastic. Steve, you played this beautifully. So he's like, yeah. So they're about to kiss, and I thought this was hilarious. I think it's just so funny. Stark interrupts them, and Bucky stole a Jeep, and they're like, let's go, everyone. And then I like that Stark's like, hey, wait a minute, what were you guys doing? Continue. And I thought that was just fantastic. I think their banter is just fantastic. So then, this is a very long episode, so I almost don't even know if they need this, except they needed to have the reference to the first movie. So they're doing the same train heist. Great shots, fantastic shots. They both look so good there. And then here comes Steve in this version, and he's going to slow down the train so they can get on it. And here, this is where Bucky falls. Instead of in the other one, it's a little bit further into the mission, and he falls at the side of the train. So here he slips right away, but instead of falling off and turning into the Winter Soldier, Peggy, Captain Carter, catches him, pulls him back up onto the train, and again they have that reference about you almost pulled my arm off. So he's fine. Never going to become the Winter Soldier in this reality. So Steve Rogers goes in, I think this is very Iron Giant in these shots, and it's a trap! It's a trap! And he's like, Peggy, get out! And boy, who could survive that? Wink, wink, all right? So they run off. And so in this sequence, it's not Bucky who apparently makes the ultimate sacrifice, but it's Steve. So they run off the train, and they're like, that looks bad, and it looks really bad. And so I love this shot. Look, it reminds me of the shot in Mulan, right? And you hear Peggy's voice screaming, Steve. Here she screams, this is a pain too great. It was worse than being turned into the super soldier. Her heart is broken. And so she's still feeling it as these two argue. And Colonel Flynn is like, women, so emotional. And I'm like, let's just punch this guy right now. But she decides to punch Zola instead. And I love that. I love that she goes and gets him to talk. And she's like, I'll never tell you anything. And she's like, he told me everything. And she says, we have to go to this castle. That's where the Tesseract is going to be. We might not make it out. This is where she says, you're lucky to be in the room, to that idiot. And then she's like, you might not make it back, but we need to, we'll save the world. And everyone's like, okay. And even Stark gets stuck going. And Peggy says, you never know. We might need someone to push a button. They have a missed opportunity on that. That's why I bring it up, that I want to point out. So look at that. That's a evil Disney castle. And so look, she runs. This is like one of my favorite things. So she runs through the woods, up through the trees, does a twist with the moonlight. The moon is backlight. Oh my God. Then comes down. Oh, I'm like, all that you missed. But she grabs the ledge of the wall, vaults over, comes down, and then look, I love that. Again, doesn't hesitate. Just absolutely fantastic. She's got raw power and she ain't afraid to use it. Then she pushes the button. I wish at least Howard had been like, you said I was going to push the buttons, because that's Howard's job. So they come in, and I love the way she flipped over these sandbags. Like, look at that, using her momentum. I'm like, were you a freaking gymnast? Harley Quinn is supposed to be able to do gymnastic moves like this. She's supposed to be a little bit more powered up, too, because of Poison Ivy. So I'm like, why don't we ever see this? So that's just incredible. And then she takes that guy out. And then I loved also when she reached through the sandbag wall and pulled this guy out through it. I mean, this stuff was just incredible. Another great use of lights. And they go, okay, Peggy, you go high. Bucky will take his team and go low. But of course, speaking of Back to the Future, and Spielberg produced that movie, why do they have to cut these things so close? Of course, he's just about to light up the Tesseract. So they have a lot of theming in Hydra. They're like, that's only 7 little metal arms, though, instead of 8. But Bucky makes a discovery downstairs that the Hydra Stomper is indestructible. So I like this. This reminds me a little bit of Sleeping Beauty in the castle sequence when they go to find the spinning wheel. So instead, this time, they use the light to find the Tesseract. I'm like, it's beautiful. So look, Here is the Red Skull counting his chickens before they hatched, or in this case, his octopus arms. And so they come in and they're like, whoa, maybe this is not looking good. And of course it's a big octopus. It's theming for Hydra. Fantastic. So, but the Red Skull, even in this reality, dies. And I love that Peggy's like, I think maybe now we need a plan. So Steve's okay, and he's like, you got to get me back into the suit so I can help Peggy. He's like, just charge me up. It's not going to last for that long, but it'll be something. So they charge him up. They had that funny gag about him falling over. And then I love the, again, lack of hesitation. He's like, where's Peggy? And Bucky says, she drew the high card. And so Steve immediately goes through the roof. I thought that was fantastic. So meanwhile, things are going bad upstairs. And she gets Stark to the machines, and he does a little reference, by the way, to Hedy Lamarr, who was not only a famous movie star at that time, but also was very gifted in science and actually made some discoveries and some patents, I believe. Gal Gadot is speaking of Wonder Woman, is supposed to be doing a movie or a Showtime series about her. I hope we see that at some point. So here, what's she gonna do to take on this Hydra octopus? She grabs a sword from the castle, and she gets all Prince Philip on its ass. And then look how great she looks. That's a total Wonder Woman pose. That's a Wonder Woman pose. So she's being dragged back, and she uses the sword to stop herself. And that's just a great shot. That's just absolutely incredible. Of course, it's not totally working, but it's slowing her down. Here comes Steve, and he's like, I told you it was indestructible. And he and Bucky, they all open fire. And now it's yellow light instead of blue light, but it's not as effective because he's about to lose power. So Steve actually gets everybody out because this Hydra, I couldn't take any more screen grabs. So basically, the octopus screams, and it's hurting everybody who's not superhuman. So Steve gets them all to safety, but little does he know he used his last bit of juice. So she's like, push it in. So Steve comes back just in time to say goodbye. His suit's lifeless on the floor. And they say something about, we'll have to have a dance another time, just like they did in the first movie, although, of course, now the positions are reversed. So very heroic. She pushes this thing in, and I love that shot of her disappearing into the Tesseract. Oh, it's so cool! Wow, and the sword, I mean, it's all King Arthur-y. That's just fantastic. Which, of course, is perfect for her because she's a British character. So she goes in, the Tesseract closes and explodes, and Steve is left alone, just as Peggy was. Oh my God, I love it. And they're like, boy, they really messed up that castle. All right, so then we think that maybe Howard got the Tesseract to work again, because of course Steve went into the ice, he didn't go into the Tesseract. So they open up the Tesseract, that looks just like the facility where we saw in the First Avengers movie. She pops out I wonder how long it's been for her. Does time pass differently there? Does it seem instantaneous? Because she looks the same. And although she's certainly taking care of that squid. And she's all ready. And she's got her sword. Look, I think it's just the same sword, but the blue light makes it look very cool. And she looks around and she's like, Steve? And then there's Nick Fury and Hawkeye, which are Samuel L. Jackson and Jeremy Renner, thank goodness. And Jeremy Renner says, I think that's Captain Carter from Legend. And she's like, so where's Steve? And Nick Fury has to give her, just like he did Steve, the bad news. And you can see it on her face. And then that's the episode. That's the episode, and I just thought it was absolutely incredible. We'll be seeing more of Captain Carter in this very season, and I just can't wait. So what did you think? What do you think of the changes that were made? How do you think they did by Steve? And what do you think of the artistry, from the cinema, the craft perspective of how the show is put together? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.